Senator Schumer will join us in the 7 a.m. hour this morning, and we'll talk more about that. But he's definitely trying to get that testimony.
Yeah.
Which brings us to those new numbers on impeachment. In the latest Fox News poll, 50% of registered voters think the president should be impeached and removed from office, up 1 point since October. 4% think he should be impeached but not removed from office, and 41% do not think he should be impeached at all. When looking at the two articles of impeachment brought forward by House Democrats, 53% think President Trump abused the power of his office, 38% do not. 48% think he obstructed Congress, 34% do not. And when looking at other charges House Democrats could have brought forward as articles of impeachment against the president, 50% think that President Trump obstructed justice, 37% do not. And 45% think the president committed bribery, 37% do not. When asked if it was standard practice for presidents to ask foreign leaders to investigate political rivals, only 22% said it was typical. Among Republicans, 33% thought this was normal practice. Overall, pretty devastating numbers for the president, though.
They are devastating up and down the line. Donnie Deutsch, my gosh, you look at all of the numbers. I'm still stunned by the top number that, again, 50% still want him impeached and removed from office.
Yeah.
Only 41% don't. 4% want him impeached but not removed. Those are devastating numbers. Bill Clinton never got into the 30s on impeachment. And I just think about the Republicans that have been running around telling everybody, and also Trump hacks who work for online newspapers, running around writing columns saying that this has been horrible for the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi. Those numbers are devastating up and down the line for any politician, Republican or Democrat alike.
They are, and they're absolute. But there's one thing that to me is a little bit of a gray cloud amongst the silver lining, is that since October, which is basically when we paraded the most credible witnesses that you could possibly have, whether they're lifelong people that gave their service to the country, down to a Gordon Sondland, who to me was so incredibly incriminating, yet it hasn't moved. It's still at 50. It grew one. That's the concern to me, that it is so baked at this point. One would have thought, if we went back to October, that 50 or that 49 would have gone to 56, 57, 58. And the needle is not moving at all. So although the numbers, when you look at them in their absolute terms, and obviously the rage is going to give us some real deep insight, that is a great name, by the way, that to me, that they haven't moved is a bit concerning to me.
Yes, Steve Kornacki, let's go through the numbers and talk about the majority wanting him to be removed, but also those other questions that were asked about obstruction and the other areas that really took apart the president's performance in this Ukraine scandal. What jumped out at you?
Sure. Let me throw an object, maybe a cup or something, first on the table to live up to the rage here. Maybe I throw something at Donnie. Start a fight on the set or something.
Donnie.
Yeah, no, what Donnie was saying, I think, is right, though. I think that's the big picture story I'm seeing with these numbers. I mean, this Fox News poll, this is the worst poll on impeachment I've seen for Trump in some time. But that said, take a look at the average of all polls out there. And if you look at that right now, it's 47% impeach, 46% don't. And that's consistent with where it's been. I'm looking at one this morning, just came out, USA Today, that has the opposite of Fox. It has 45% impeach, 51% don't impeach. So really, there was a big jump when this Ukraine story broke, when all the key characters were introduced to the public, when the Democrats began their impeachment drive. You saw the numbers move up to basically where they are right now in the average of polls. And I think Donnie is right. Big picture, those haven't changed. They speak to basically every Republican being against this, basically every Democrat being for this, and that polarization that you've seen since 2016. And I think from the White House's standpoint, yeah, no president wants to be impeached. No president wants that to be part of his or her legacy, no question. But I think from a survival standpoint, that's been the key to the White House on this. If you keep that Republican number, support among Republicans for the president at 90% plus, that's going to keep Republicans in the House and Republicans in the Senate in line. And I think largely, in fact, completely at this point, that's what we've seen.
But you know, Adrian, and it must just be the old politician in me. When I look at numbers like that, I think, boy, I would be spouting that on the campaign. I mean, if Democrats know how to fight, and there's actually no evidence that on the campaign trail they do know how to fight Donald Trump, but if they did know how to fight Donald Trump, I would lift those numbers. I would be pounding him day in and day out. I would be pounding Susan Collins day in and day out. Tom Tillis day in and day out. Cory Gardner day in. Wait a second. You're voting to acquit this guy win, and then I would just get my 5 top numbers out of that Fox News poll, which makes it doubly powerful on the campaign trail for independence. And I understand what Donnie's saying. I understand what Steve's saying. It hasn't moved as much as maybe Trump's opponents would like. I don't care. If I'm a Democrat running against a Republican, I scoop up those numbers and I bang Republican candidates over the head from now until Election Day on it, talking about how sleazy he is. And even a Fox News poll shows that Americans believe that this president crossed every line he could with his sleazy actions.
Yeah, Joe, I think you basically just wrote the ad for the DSCC. I mean, we talk a lot about how these numbers will impact President Trump's reelection. We don't talk enough about how these numbers will impact the reelection of some of these senators who are in really tough re-elections, especially in those swing states that you just mentioned, which, by the way, will be crucial to winning or not winning the presidency for Donald Trump. States like North Carolina, Tom Tillis, states like Arizona, Martha McSally, even Iowa with Joni Ernst. I mean, we could name 5 or 6 senators who are going to have a really difficult time defending not impeaching the president should they go in that direction. And, Joe, I'm glad that you mentioned independent voters, because that's the number that I look at. When you look at the fact that in this last poll, when it was conducted, I believe in late October, I believe 38% of independents supported impeachment. Now that number has gone up to 45%. Democrats are going to win this election at the White House, the ballot box, and down to the Senate races by getting independent voters, a majority of them, in our corner, and also by getting those suburban swing voters. So when you look at the numbers holistically, I'm more concerned less with where the majority of Americans are and more concerned with where those independent voters are and where those swing voters are when it comes to this election.
Absolutely.
And you take swing states, like let's talk about Jonathan Lemire, North Carolina. Here's a swing state that Donald Trump actually won a bit more easily than others. But even if Donald Trump wins North Carolina, look at Tom Tillis, a guy who has been bleeding support over the past 4 years. In a poll I saw, the guy's he's only at 31% approval rating, low 30s. And he just, that guy, I mean, Mitch McConnell's not going to have enough money to throw at that guy to help him win that race, because his reputation right now, 4 or 5 years in, is so bad. I mean, McConnell's got a race, going to have a race of his own in Kentucky. So, again, these numbers may not be as bad for the president, but what about those senators like Tillis, who, like, again, low 30s? I mean, how's he going to balance this when it's time to vote on impeachment and these numbers look so bad for the president?
Yeah, Tillis is a great example. He's one of a number of Republicans you and Adrian just outlined who are going to face a lot of scrutiny here for their vote, who are in difficult races, who have seen their poll numbers really sink in the last couple of years of Trump's since Trump took office. And yes, I mean, the president and his reelection team, they're exuding a lot of confidence. They held a briefing for some select reporters last week. We attended, and, they point to, since impeachment began, since the Ukraine matter sort of burst into the headlines in September, they point to their fundraising numbers have gone up. They point to their attendance at rallies has gone up. Their social media interactions have gone up. And they say in their internal data that they're seeing, as I mentioned earlier, independents, particularly in battleground states, sort of souring on impeachment. But these are not overwhelming numbers either. They certainly realize that they are in a close fight going forward, and certainly everything will change if the Republicans aren't able to hang on to the Senate, or if they lose a number of